Thank you. Right, well, we were looking at various things. I'm sorry this is so small on the screen, but you will be able to get the information on the website as well. All of it will be on there. So we know from research that the problems of housing crime and unregulated addiction services are a problem. They all interlink, and this proliferation of addiction services doesn't help. So we thought, well, what can we learn from other towns and cities? And certainly when we're looking at housing, and if we look at the moment, the only licensing we've got is for HMOs, and that is the mandatory licensing for very large HMOs. It doesn't cover smaller ones. However, the Housing Act 2004 also provides additional licensing and selective licensing. So what is the difference? Mandatory licensing, like I said, is just for large HMOs. The additional covers large and small HMOs only, and the selective covers all private rented properties in a designated area. For the benefits, when we're looking at additional and selective, it seems to reduce serious crime, antisocial behaviour, improves housing conditions, increases property values. Road landlords either comply or leave the area. Increases the amount of housing benefit paid to the local authority, locates landlords owing tax to the HMRC, provides the local authority with more housing stock. Because if the landlord does not comply, the local authority can produce management orders or even compulsory purchase. It also reduces transience, aids regeneration, and more employment becomes the result. Now, we looked at an example from Newham Borough Council. They've gone for borough-wide selective licensing. We're not suggesting that for Bournemouth. We're only considering this or looking at this for Boscombe. If we look at the sort of changes over the last 10 years and compare Newham with Boscombe, we can see that there's a population increase in Newham of 26%, in Boscombe it's 30%, the private rented sector is 49% in Newham, in Boscombe it's 62%. The transience in Newham is 25% move in 1 year, in Boscombe 33% move in less than 2 years. As far as antisocial behaviour and the tenure type, 35.63% of all HMOs had antisocial behaviour in Newham, 12.7% of all private rented sector. The rest are Lewisham Borough-owned properties or registered social landlord or owner-occupier, and those are much less in terms of antisocial behaviour. Well, what about landlord accreditation? This is often cited as being a good thing. Pre-selective licensing in Newham, they had a free landlord accreditation scheme for 10 years, but they only had a 2.5% take-up. Also, pre-selective licensing, they believed they had 4,000 landlords in the area, but since licensing, they found they had 21,000. As far as the finances are concerned, pre-licensing, it cost Newham £100 million in housing benefit with no incentive to reinvest. So all that money is going out to landlords, but there's nothing to say, you've got to make your property up together, you've got to make it decent. The licensing cost Newham £1 million to set up, but in the first year they get 7.5 million back. This money has to be ring-fenced. It can only be used for administration and enforcement. £700,000 extra council tax was brought in the first 9 months, and 1.3 million was expected in an increase in council tax from HMOs alone for 2015-16. Now, each local authority can decide what the licence fee is. They'll have to work out what the costs and so forth are. For Newham, they went for £150 for 5 years for each property. Now, that's if you registered before the licensing scheme came into operation. That works out at 57 pence per property per week. It's peanuts. After the deadline, they said it's got to be 500. So that was £1.92 a week. It's still small. Now, the key to the success, and it has been very successful because they tried it in a pilot area first, was they had a multi-agency intelligence gathering and enforcement approach. And enforcement is very, very important. And a very strong political will to ensure that this happened. They had Newham's local authority using all their agencies, all the departments within the authority came together. The police, the Department for Work and Pensions, UK Border Agency, HMRC, NHS, Fire Service, schools, etc. And they used something called geographical information systems. And this will just give you an idea of what it looks like. Basically, this is something that it's all computerized, and it means that, say, the police are on the street and they've attended to a crime, they can then, which has happened outside someone's property or in the property, they can then phone that in, that immediately gets logged at a central database. The following morning, it might be, or a few days down the line, there might be that there's been a lot of problems with waste or something like this at the house, and there's been a call to the local authority, that gets logged again. Maybe the fire service has been called for something, that gets logged again. So basically a picture gets built up. So all of these teams work together and everybody knows exactly what they're looking at. So when they're looking at a map like that, they can then literally say, look at all this, there's an awful lot of calls to this particular house, this particular road, we need to know what's going on there. And that's really why they see it as part of something that it is in the landlord's remit to try and sort out. And they don't suggest that the landlord is left to try and sort this out on their own. This has to be an approach which is a team approach, so that the council is working with the landlord and other agencies working with the landlord. It would not be fair to leave it down to the landlord on their own. Well, the Newham's outcomes in the first 9 months, you can see up here 1,900 plus multi-agency operations, 200 arrests. They found that 1 in 5 properties contained wanted criminals. 110 prosecution cases, 75 simple cautions, and so forth. I won't read it all out. But I do note that the Centre for Social Justice has described British seaside towns such as Blackpool as dumping grounds for people facing problems such as unemployment, social exclusion and substance abuse. And certainly Blackpool have turned to this method as well. They used it first of all in the South Shore area of the town, where 50% were privately rented houses. They had high levels of drug and alcohol abuse and antisocial behaviour. So they introduced it in March 2012, and then in September 2013, they noted that criminal incidents had dropped from 720 to 333. And in April this year, they've decided to license another area. So how do we get this selective licensing? How do we go about it? Well, the council can't just decide to do it. They've got to produce evidence. They've got to show that the area really does have significant and persistent antisocial behaviour. They've got to say, well, we have considered alternative means to address the issue. And they have to feel, or they have to be able to show, that selective licensing does fit with their overall housing strategy. With antisocial behaviour, yes, it has to be persistent, it has to be there all the time, and also they've got to be able to say, well, some or all of the private sector landlords who've let the premises are failing to take action to combat the problem, and it would be appropriate for them to do so. So that's not all the landlords, but just some. And that when making a designation, that combined with other measures, this is where the landlord is not left on their own, it means that they have to work with other groups. So combined with other measures taken in the area, that it will lead to a reduction or elimination of the problem. It doesn't include social landlords under the meaning of the Act. And what counts as social, as antisocial behaviour? Well, crime, you can see there's a list there. Nuisance neighbours, intimidation, harassment, begging, antisocial drinking, prostitution, curb crawling, there's a whole list. And environmental crime, fly tipping, graffiti, fly posting, litter, waste, nuisance vehicles, drugs paraphernalia, and so forth. So how do you get all that information? How do you get all that? Because it's a big job, a very big job. And like I said, Newham Council use this geographical information system. Other councils that we've looked at have outsourced the task, but certainly if you use the geographical information system, it means it's there for the long term, and it's something that you can use constantly for possibly other things. I mean, the information's there. It's not like somebody's somehow being spied upon, because the information's already there. It's just about collating it all. The council needs to show that they've considered whether there's alternative means of addressing the issues, such as the landlord accreditation scheme. Well, have they? Well, the landlord accreditation scheme existed at least since January 2006. And the council then launched their own in February 2013. What we need to think about is, has it made any difference? And I draw your mind back to Lewisham, who ran one for 10 years. It didn't really get them anywhere. And where they thought they had 4,000 landlords, in fact they had 21,000. And does it fit within the council's housing strategy? Well, there's a link to the housing strategy. Yes, it does fit. How long does it take to implement selective licensing? Councils were taking 4 years on the outset of all of this, because there's a lot to do and a lot to learn, and it's pretty extensive. However, we can learn from other councils, and more recently councils have been able to do this in 2 years, and I'm hearing of one that's about to launch one within 18 months. It would have taken them 18 months. So how much housing benefit is paid to landlords in Boscombe? Well, I don't know. I can tell you that in Churchill Gardens alone, and I know you should all know that place, that area is very small, it is approximately £1 million. So this is taxpayers' money which could be used to provide decent homes. So the question I leave you with is, should Bournemouth Council adopt selective licensing for Boscombe?